Interestingly, I was talking with a hard, far-right, reactionary, Trump-supporting Republican coworker, and he agreed with me on the need for a moratorium on AI research. I think that that's reasonable, because that's not necessarily a class issue. That is sort of more of a existential issue, like, bleh. This, along with being pro-COVID vaccine, are his only non-reactionary positions. Well, milk them for all they're worth. What can I tell you? I'm glad you at least, through dialogue, were able to find that. That's good. Even the most reactionary people will have some common ground because we are all living in a capitalist hellscape. That doesn't mean we should tail them, but educate them to help them change their perception if they are willing. They do often have a significant hostility toward the climate crisis, yeah. But yeah, that's right. I mean, the people even in the most backward sections of the working class can sometimes be reached, but these sort of very bizarre and I think sometimes distracting efforts to center those people, the people who will take the most effort to reach and the most work to change their thinking. In other words, they have the most ground to be covered in sort of coming up to a communist position. That's not really where you start. You start with the advanced masses, and then with the help of the advanced masses, you start exerting influence on the middle masses. Some of them you can bring around, and then you at least set as your goal not to bring all of the most backward reactionary working class masses up to being a full communist, but you at least try to keep them under control. You know what I mean? You keep them from being utterly wantonly destructive, and that's a lot of times the best you can hope for. This is actually covered in Arling Activista, activist study, put out by the Communist Party of the Philippines, which we have on the channel. So yeah. Elon Musk removed blocking on X. Now, we were talking about this before. Did he actually remove it? I'm dying to see right now. I'm going to go look at a random account and see if I can block it. Because that's fucking crazy. And this is also like 24 hours later. He just announced that. All right, it's loading now. Let me just scroll down to somebody I retweeted. I'm just going to see if blocking is a feature. No, not my feed. Come on, come on, come on. Slow. Can I also just say, one thing I don't miss about Twitter is how they kept recommending the same things, same accounts for me to follow that I just had no interest in following. No, I can still block. He's talking about removing blocking. He hasn't done it yet. I still have the block option anyway. The most responses I get to my N95 mask is there a new COVID outbreak? How should I reply? You can just say, it never fully went away, and I don't want to catch it again. It never fully went away. It's as MP is saying, the old outbreak never went away. You can tell people that we're in a lull right now, but it's not totally gone, and there are new surges like every few months. So, you're just masking so that you don't catch or spread it or contribute to a new surge. That's what I would do. I don't get that many comments on my mask. I've told people if they ask, that I've gotten long COVID in the past and I can't afford to catch it again and COVID isn't over. I mean, usually people just kind of leave it at that. I don't get a lot of comments in the first place, but yeah, you can just tell them it never fully went away. We're in a period of decreased spread right now, but it's not totally gone. And in fact, right now it's been climbing for 2 straight months. So I've heard that they are bringing back COVID restrictions mid-September, but I don't know the details or if that's true. I just saw it a number of times on Twitter, but would make sense if we're about to have another Delta type spike. I haven't seen that at all, so I can't comment either. Let's see. COVID restrictions coming back 2023. Do we get anything? Let's see. Well, they ended the public health emergency. Yet another summer COVID wave may have started in the US. Hey, I got news for you. There's only a month of summer left, and it's still climbing, so this is going to be a summer-fall strain. I'm not seeing anything about restrictions. Finding an article from CNN, this country has finally scrapped the last of its COVID restrictions. That's from 5 days ago. Oh, they're talking about New Zealand. Whatever. All right. Okay. So yeah, I haven't seen that. It just feels like we're doomed to an Omicron spike with a Delta level bad strain. I mean, possibly, we really don't know. It's a novel virus. We're learning about it in real time, and there's no real history of it to fall back on, other than, the last 3 years. So, what we saw last year is that we had a sustained spread of Omicron for the entire year. Then a lull, now it's coming back, and I really just don't know. I just don't know. So far this year has been very close to the 2021 pattern, but I don't know if that's actually going to, extend to, then we also get like a massive spike of Omicron. I don't think that, though, would necessarily bring back restrictions. I think it would start a lot more conversations. But remember, they sent kids back to school and made that decision mid-Omicron. Like, in January 2022, when we were recording 1 million cases a day, that's when they made the decision to send kids back to school in person. So I wouldn't necessarily think any restrictions are coming back. I wouldn't know why that would, if they didn't then, I don't know why they would bring it back now. Wouldn't surprise me if they were teasing bringing back restrictions to get some kind of feel for majority opinion. Then we'll make the decision on what they're going to do based on this. Medical electioneering, which seems on point for the Democrats. Somebody else says, I live in Florida, so there will be zero COVID restrictions regardless. Yeah, in fact, in Florida, you're more likely to have a law passed outlawing you. It'll be like the special military operation. You'll be outlawed from talking about COVID like as a disease. So, yeah. No, I see absolutely no political will from the Democrats to do anything about this. There's a new head of the CDC, and in all of the introductory pictures, she's walking around the building unmasked, talking to other unmasked people. So it's an anti-masker. That's what you get from the Democrats now. Have I read The Last Question by Asimov? I've read a bunch of Asimov 20 years ago. And I may have, but I don't know. What's it about and why are you asking? Need more information. Would it be worthwhile to try to make a basic vocabulary on AGI and AI dangers so we can better communicate to the masses who don't know about it? I don't know. I don't think I've tried to do my part of raising some awareness on that topic. I'm just never going to be the person that can really be out there, like front and center with it. Yeah, I don't know. Let me maybe rephrase that question into what are the most productive things we can do at this stage? I don't know if like a basic vocabulary is necessarily it, but what can we do at this stage that's going to be the most productive? I don't know, because right now I'm just reading articles to the 1,500 or so people who will listen to this. That's what I'm doing, So it's like, I don't know, share articles, talk it up, see what people say, I find the closer people are to the tech world, the more likely they are to vehemently downplay it. And that was exactly why Yudkowsky said he started going to the general public. Because, and I mentioned this too in one of the streams. Somebody said, will there be an AI cult where people start worshiping the AI? And I mentioned this in the comments of the video when I posted it, but I neglected to mention it in the next stream, which I had meant to do. And my answer to that question, will there be like AI cults of people worshiping the AI like a god? I thought of that at the time, it's late in the stream and whatever, and I was thinking about it very literally, very sort of Heaven's Gate. We're going to wear like Nike sneakers and white robes and like shave our heads and whatever. I was thinking about cult in like very sort of specific classical terms. But to be honest, the tech bros working on this shit already are acting like a cult. And some of that's because billions of dollars are being invested in it. Like there's sort of certain material incentives for it. But I think it's not even fully accounted for by the material interests. There's people who just believe in AI already in a cult-like, very uncritical, quote, true believer type of fashion. So, yeah, I don't know. Exactly. I'm just trying to read some articles now. Anyone got a Blue Sky code? I've been giving out my Blue Sky codes to patrons. Actually, the next one is going to another communist that I already have my next one marked. I get them every other Friday. That's my Blue Sky code allowance. They give them out every 2 weeks. My next one is already spoken for, but I'm probably just going to keep giving them out to patrons. That's you can enter the Patreon lottery for Blue Sky codes by becoming a patron. But I can say, from the fact that every time Twitter has an issue, as we were mentioning before, and then Blue Sky gets like swamped and the site stops working, they're not ready for prime time yet. So I don't know if they're going to be letting, they're going to probably be on invite-only mode for quite a while, I think. Big tech needs AGI to fulfill the human laziness gap. I don't know what you mean specifically. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I've always hated the imperialist propaganda that is Call of Duty. Yeah, I hate those militarist games. I mean, just, there's so many other things you can do than just be army guys. Speaking of the Holocaust, have you noticed how scary the normalization of Holocaust denial has gotten in the last 20 years? Definitely, that's part and parcel of the rise of the far right. I find just fewer people mention the Holocaust these days. I feel like mentioning it at all is it's just becoming rarer and rarer. And I think there's a lot of people who don't even know what it is or haven't heard of it. Holocaust was the massacre, mass-scale genocide by Nazi Germany of particularly Jewish people, but many other people were in the camps and killed as well. But yeah, it's, I think also with the rise of the internet, I mentioned the far right, and the amount of Holocaust denial. So I never encountered Holocaust denial directly until about 2008 or so on the internet. And I didn't take it seriously at first. Like, I didn't think it was, I thought it was just some, like, kind of real, at best, sort of weird joke or abstract. Like, it didn't make sense to me that people were, like, actually sort of going into Nazi politics. Like, I was like, well, I've never really met neo-Nazis per se. This, like, can't really be a thing. So I didn't really take it seriously at first. And then later I did. And I was like, oh, this is how it's coming back. This is how it's coming back is through underground internet forums and things like that. And that caused me to completely freak out. And then, fortunately, Occupy Wall Street happened a couple years after that. And there was more actual left stuff to get involved with at that point. Because, prior to that, libertarians were kind of all over stuff, including the anti-war movement, which was really how I got sort of even familiar with any of that. It was getting really, really loud. So yeah, I mean, I find it's discussed less and less in general. And then, yeah, more common to find people who are like, learn the truth about the Holocaust. Like, and then, of course, their version of the truth is that it didn't happen. On this, if there's a place with some basics vocabulary on AI to share, so we can help others with basic terminology, so these conversations are deeper than arguing if the current AI is a tool or not. I think people who are just like, AI is a tool, just are not ready to handle anything about this conversation. I would send them maybe the Yudkowsky article about the time the Time editorial. That was the first thing that I read. Holocaust denial is a big problem because it furthers the anti-Semitic narrative that Jewish people are trying to control the world in capital. Yeah, this was like one of the basic tropes. You have things like Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion, which was anti-Semitic and anti-communist propaganda that started circulating in Tsarist Russia, obviously against the rising socialist movement. And there were anti-Jewish pogroms, which were basically like lynchings that were coming out of that very reactionary, backward police state that was Tsarist Russia. And then this just got carried over among proto-fascists, and then it got folded into fascism and Nazism itself, and then eventually the Holocaust. But yeah, it's a way of taking class struggle narratives and racializing them. So you're turning, and this is what fascists do. They will take things that have revolutionary aesthetics, revolutionary rhetoric, and then keep some of the aesthetics and visuals and rhetoric and the general overall vibe of it, but then they'll hollow out the revolutionary content and replace it with counter-revolutionary content. So in that case, they took class struggle rhetoric that the capitalists control industry and whatever, and then they racialized it. So they basically replaced class struggle with race struggle in that way. And so yeah, it's part and parcel of far-right narratives to this day. America, land of the free, except for all the book bannings. Absolutely. But it's to them it's being done in the name of the children, and it's just a complete lie. They've closed a lot of school libraries in Florida. It's disgusting and harmful to the children. I am homeschooling my son because this is madness. Yeah, it's a tough situation. There's a lot of places where the schools are basically unusable, and then a lot of the homeschool communities are like hardcore Christians as well. And it's like, I don't know if you really want to be, forming communities with those people who pulled their kids out of the schools because they're too secular or whatever, or because they're teaching kids about climate change. So it's it's a pretty big task to try to educate your kids yourself, and as I'm sure you're aware, but it's a huge problem in the country, is the collapse of public education. These people are so evil, trying to steal libraries from minors. Absolutely. They want to indoctrinate the children with their conservative reactionary values. Having my own library card and being able to pick all the different things I wanted to watch and read was so liberatory as a kid and adolescent. I mean, fortunately, there is the internet, so kids, many kids, can still get on there. But yeah, I mean, for sure. Although, they've been going after archive.org. Finball had a video about the copyright suits against archive.org, Internet Archive. And there's still things like LibGen, where you can find a lot of stuff. Some of the mirrors of LibGen have been shut down, like zlib. But I think they were more commercializing it anyway, the one that got shut down. Like queer books, people writing about their trauma, abuse, mental illness, and recovery were so important. Yeah, and that's exactly what they're trying to ban. They want youth to be robbed of any kind of representation, support, or resources. Yeah, because they are abusers, and they're trying to facilitate their abuse. That's really what this is about. On the topic of Meta, since this year, all Oculus products force you to create a Facebook account, or you can't use them offline. It's insidious. Yeah, I mean, I have spent significant amounts of time trying to work around all this stuff for years and years. Kind of seeing this coming. Not in specifics, but just I should learn how to try to do as much as I can without relying on this, because you just never know when it's going to go away. I hate Facebook, and Twitter is going that way, absolutely. I've reported 3 explicitly neo-Nazi pages on Facebook. Nothing happened to the pages. Yeah, I have a really old article, I think from 3 years ago, 2020, on the channel, Facebook equals Fashbook. And I read an article in that video, this is before I was doing live streams, about everyone on the board of Facebook is far-right Republican activists, active in the Republican Party. And you can see it how, here, let's look. What are the top 10 accounts on Facebook. It's like always Ben Shapiro and like Bongino and other like far right people. I never got into Facebook, but like this is all the big social media sites. They go to shit. Absolutely. I have a good topic that everyone should research that almost no one has heard of. The Green Corn Rebellion of 1917. All right, I'll make a note of that. How does that sound? I have not heard of that. Any space online where your community that you build can just get vaporized by corporate CEOs. Yeah, I think that's pretty eye-opening for people about Twitter right now. Is like, you can build this. I mean, I have tens of thousands of posts on Twitter, some of which actually are worth something. I mean, like if you read them, you would learn something from them. And who knows if they'll even be there, because Muskman is just going to make room for some guy selling custom cigarette lighters or something. Tumblr is a bit hard to navigate at first, but there's some good stuff there. They also don't use algorithms the same way that Facebook and Twitter do. Yeah, I know Tumblr has a reputation for being kind of more like left-wing, almost to like a ridiculous point, and not necessarily communist, but like, yeah, kind of like rad libby. I mean, which is what you sort of expect with the U.S. left, but I've turned TikTok into a propaganda machine, and it's going pretty good. I upload 2 to 3 times a day. All right. Yeah, I don't really watch TikTok. I've talked about TikTok before. I'm just not into that format of content. Let's see. I agree 100% with this coup. Are you talking about Niger? We can be as hopeful as we want, but it could just be a right-wing anti-NATO capitalist nation. Multipolarity isn't something to be hopeful for. Yeah. So, are you saying you agree with what I was saying about the coup? Because, I don't know. Yeah, but anyway, I agree. Multipolarity isn't something to be hopeful for, which to me is all the coup is kind of looking like. When studying Africa, there's a lot of media blindness. We can't draw complete conclusions from incomplete information. Yeah, like I said, though, I have been trying to research M62. I forget the name of the guy that sort of put up as the leader of that, but that has sort of gotten some of the most detailed information because it goes back to like a year before the coup. But I still just can't, even noting that it is incomplete, I still have not found anything really detailed. So, yeah, we do have to wait for more complete information and understand the limits of the information we do have. We do not yet know if the people there are at a point of organizing that the masses can, at a bare minimum, make demands by the new government, and we do not know what these governments will do. Right, which is why nobody should get too excited yet. Also, fuck Midwestern Marx for even considering talking to that libertarian, off-the-grid country freak with his stupid welfare queen 80s era capitalist propaganda bullshit. So I'm sensing some hostility here. So you're talking about how Midwestern Marx on Twitter, I did see this, it got shared over on Blue Sky, that he was in support, seemingly full-throated support, of the guy that was doing the redheaded guy out in the woods doing his I Hate Poor People country song. Yeah, it's like, try not to be so fucking obvious with your bait. But like, that's really bad. Yeah, he has been roasted about it on Twitter. Midwestern Marx refuses to crit and self-crit. I know he's young, so I wanted to give him a chance, but he has to be accountable at some point. That point would be now. Absolutely. From my perspective, Russia may take an imperialist role like the USA did against the Spanish during that war in countries like Cuba and Puerto Rico. Yeah, well, advanced capitalism leads to one place, and it is imperialism. Imperialism is the highest stage of capitalism. Once capitalism has consolidated to a certain point, it starts exhibiting those characteristics, and Russia is at that point. It's not as established as an imperial power as some of its rivals, but that is what it's doing, and that's, you know, who its competitors are, and that's the game it's playing. TikTok can actually give you a window into the live on-the-ground conditions in Africa and the coup, but it is hard to find. Please do share. Niger's military junta has revoked military cooperation agreements with France. Yep. TikTok is the only social media platform that doesn't completely ban revolutions or live protests. Okay. Yeah, like I said, it just has not been part of my repertoire, and I find the short form content just aggravating to watch, but so hence I haven't gotten into it. But yeah, so Midwestern Marx is either stupid and easy to manipulate, or he's been a grifter from the start. Either way, not everyone needs to have a YouTube channel. Agree. Somebody responds, "You ain't lying. This is not his first strike. He uncritically supported a transphobe and then stupidly brought up the Black Hundreds, thinking Stalin actually, was into working with them." We did a video about that here on the channel, as a matter of fact. One good thing Russia has going for it in Africa is there are no Russian colonies ever in Africa. Yeah, from a PR perspective, that is good for them. But why were there no Russian colonies ever in Africa? Because the Tsarist Empire didn't have that much reach. And then by the time they were entering more, technological proficiency and development, it became the USSR, which was an anti-colonial, anti-imperialist power. So yeah, they don't have that history. Hence now that they've returned to capitalism and are in advanced capitalism, imperialism, they are seeking to do imperialist things, but they look like this completely innocent person without that blood on their hands. So yeah, that is looking good for them. How long that perception will last in the face of the reality of whatever they're actually going to do is another story. Part of what is happening in Russia in particular has to give a better deal than China or the USA because of the crisis of war, so this in the short term has brought some trust to the people. Again, we're at the negotiation stages of that at this point. We don't even know if they'll be able to follow through on it successfully. So, there's clearly, they managed to get some support, at least among more educated urban males in Niger. Whether they're going to be able to follow through and maintain that support is like a different story, Maybe they will, maybe they won't. Yes, we must support Comrade Mussolini in his fight against British imperialism. Sarcasm. Yeah, exactly. I had somebody unironically try to tell me that Hitler was like fighting imperialism. No, you don't fight imperialism with imperialism. That's not how any of this works. So yeah, no, that's an inter-imperialist fight. That's not a fight against imperialism. Does Brazil have an active role in the peace talks between Ukraine and Russia? Not that I'm aware of, but Brazil, peace talks, Ukraine, Russia. I mean, as far as peace talks, I don't know if these have been going anywhere recently. Brazil's Lula intensifies diplomatic push for peace in Ukraine. So there's an article from February, article from May, article from April. Brazil's Lula pitches peace coalition for Ukraine. So has been trying to position Brazil as, let's see. So this is the February article. Brazil's Lula intensifies diplomatic push for peace in Ukraine. What exactly does that amount to? So the Russian Deputy Foreign Minister, Mikhail Galuzin, was quoted by Russia's TASS news agency Thursday as saying Moscow is studying Lula's proposal to end the conflict as it continues to assess the situation in Ukraine. The idea being floated by the Brazilian president, remember this is 6 months ago, is to create a group of countries, possibly including India, China, and Indonesia, to mediate peace talks between the nations as war fatigue starts to grip parts of the world. Brazil is hardly the only country pushing peace proposals as the conflict approaches its first anniversary on Friday. China, Turkey, and numerous others have also sought to mediate negotiations in recent weeks and months. And my understanding is this has not really gone anywhere. Another article from May in Foreign Policy: Brazil is Ukraine's best bet for peace. The non-aligned country has strong diplomatic traditions, and its president is a pro at building global coalitions. Can't read the article because it's behind a paywall. Then CNN: Brazil's Lula pitches peace coalition for Ukraine, but he treads a thin line. Proposed to create a G20 for peace, a group of countries strong enough to be respected at the negotiating table, but are still considered by some as neutral in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, including India, Indonesia, and China. Other Latin American countries are also invited. Yeah, I haven't really heard anything else about this. He pitched it to Xi Jinping, but left Beijing earlier in April without any formal commitment. He has struggled to make his proposal widely persuasive. One controversial idea that he floated for possible resolution would see Ukraine cede Crimea, which Russia annexed in 2014, a concession that Ukraine has ruled out and which the White House described as simply misguided. So, yeah, I haven't really heard anything else about this, and so I'm not sure if that's going to come to anything. And yeah, we are doing a long stream today. I happen to have a free day, and why not? I haven't been streaming as much lately either. Yes, COVID is constantly mutating to create new strains. Am I wrong? No, you're correct. You can just look up on the CDC's COVID center. There's like a variant and genomic data thing where you can see the prevalence of the different strains. They even have that on BioBot, actually, where you can see the different strains. Right now, it's really split between different strains of XBB. Let's see if I can just read them out quickly. There's another channel, Data Report, that does lots of COVID data reading in daily YouTube videos, or pretty much daily YouTube videos. Let me just see if I can read out what is most prevalent right now. And actually, this is behind, I know. Okay, that doesn't want to load. There we go. This is behind. I know that the CDC was 3 weeks behind reporting on the variant updates. So this is on BioBot. The most recent data reflect samples from the week of July 31st. So this is 3 weeks behind. It takes a long time to sequence the variants. But anyway, we've got XBB, XBB 116, XBB 116, XBB 15, XBB 191, XBB 192. All of those are about 21 or 22%. Then you got EG5 at 8.2%, which again is a variant of 192. Then you got 19 at a very small percent. So it's really the main strains as of about 3 weeks ago are XBB, XBB 116, XBB 15, XBB 191 and 192, and then EG5 coming in. So that's pretty much what it is. But yeah, there's new strains emerging all the time. You can see it on the variant timetables, though, if you look at those charts. Regarding libertarians, my sister and I suffered horrible abuse growing up. Her trauma was in ways worse than mine, considering that her mom separated from our dad when she was born. After being effectively raised by her Tea Party aunt, she turned into a super-right tradwife libertarian nutjob who joined the 3%ers. She hates trans people and thinks we're all brainwashed. Meanwhile, I turned out to be a slutty, non-binary, communist trans femme. We both loathe our parents, but boy did our paths diverge. Yeah. Dare I say your path is going to lead to significantly less internal strain and trying to justify your positions to yourself over time. Whereas she's going to be, I think she's taken on a much more rigid view of the world, let's put it that way. I would argue a significantly less healthy way of coping with that trauma that she is exhibiting. But I'm glad that you have not followed that route, you know. There are literal overt neo-Nazis putting up flyers where I live in Florida. I'm preparing for the worst. Yeah, to me it seems like Florida would be a great place if you have an opportunity to leave, I mean, there's other bad, risky places in the country, but Florida sucks. So, also just from like climate change, Florida is one of the riskiest places to live in the coming decades. So, it's very much at risk in a wide variety of ways. Hi, friend. You've been instrumental in actually getting me to read the theory. Very much appreciated. You are doing some incredibly helpful work. Well, I'm always glad to hear that. And yeah, it's actually mentioned in Reform or Revolution. There's a point there where there is a thing about how you have to read the theory. I'm too tired to recall it right now, but yeah, there's like a specific thing that I commented on. I think it's even near the beginning of it, where she comments on debate that was happening within the German Marxist party at that time about how leaving things to just the theoreticians is like not a good approach. And anyway, if I try to summarize it, I'm going to wind up just bungling it. So go listen to the audiobook. But yes, reading the theory is very important. And Rosa Luxemburg was just talking about it in that piece. Midwit Marx, in quotes. He's so clearly an op. You got to wonder how many of these people really are getting paid. I mean, that guy is getting destroyed on Twitter day after day after day. Any reasonable person would take that criticism and be like, oh, I'm doing something wrong. I think you really kind of, it raises questions about if somebody's getting paid or not when they get that kind of feedback of just people just slamming them day after day and they don't change. To me, it suggests there might be, higher odds of a paycheck being involved, of somebody specifically telling them to do that. Like it was somebody, I think it was Jackson Hinkle was trying to accuse me of being, I mean, he went with some ridiculous, just laughable LaRouchian assertion of like that I work for MI6 or some shit. And a supporter dropped in and they're like, and I saw this comment and I thought it was, appreciated it and thought it was spot on. It was like, if I was an intelligence agency trying to prop up some kind of channel in the Marxist world, my assumption is that they would promote a lot of just garbage drama and then recycled right-wing reactionary talking points. Turns out they actually just want to make sure that everybody reads The State and Revolution. So I thought that was putting things in perspective. Yeah, you got, Midwit Marx going out there and just refusing to stop promoting utter fucking shit. And you gotta wonder, is somebody paying them to do that? I do. He wants to cooperate with the infracells and the MAGA communist movements. Which, I mean, it's just a joke. It's a flat-out joke. Oh, okay, so talking about TikTok, I was saying I don't like the short-form content, but there is also TikTok Live, which is not short-form. Okay, good to know. Content you will literally never find anywhere else. I mean, I was finding some things like that on Twitter prior to the whole Musk shit, Like, I remember during 2020, I was seeing BLM protest footage I was not seeing anywhere else on Twitter that people were uploading there, so... I am also not going to let... Oh, so about Florida, I don't have enough money to leave due to inflation. I'm also not going to let Nazis run me out of my home. All right, I mean, if I will stand strong in opposition to them. All right, I mean, if you're dedicated enough to it, not everybody is that attached to where they live, but if you feel that way, then, more power to you. When I was involved in the union movement within Starbucks, I was concerned about how that union forming is trying to operate on class collaboration. I did not organize in these ways, but because I was very open in my criticism, before I helped build the worker power in my shop, the union did not have my back when I was fired. In the future, I will have to be smarter on my strategy and more patient with my timing. Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of really difficult skills involved in union organizing. It is not something that necessarily comes easily. I tried to organize in I have tried to organize in a number of workplaces with varying degrees of success. It a lot of times just doesn't work. And it's not anything you're doing. It's just like the workers decide, no, we just want to stand around and complain because it's just too scary. And you hear all kinds of excuses. Sometimes you can talk people into it anyway. But yeah, it involves a lot of difficult skills, and you're likely to get better through experience and also through reading accounts of other people's union organizing. That can really help, and we do have some things up on the channel. I did recently post a playlist specifically. Let me get the name of it. I didn't cover this when we were talking about what's new on the channel, but going through the community tab, let's see. The name of the playlist is How to Organize a Labor Union in Your Workplace, parentheses, it's not easy, but it can be done. In that playlist, we have Basics of Organizing by the IWW, Basic Workplace Organizing Guide, which is an hour longer. So there's like 3 levels of complexity. So Basics of Organizing is 23 minutes. Basic Workplace Organizing Guide is an hour and 13 minutes by the IWW. Then the IWW Organizing Manual is almost 3 hours by the IWW. Then Organizing Methods in the Steel Industry by William Z. Foster. Then Common Sense Reasons for Worker Self-Management. How to Fire Your Boss. My Experience, Union Activism in a Yellow Union. And Union Organizing and Anti-Union, Union Busting Discussion, and audiobook of Leaked Borders Books HR Memo. That has to do with the late 90s campaign at Borders Books. So that's a not overly long playlist, maybe, 10 or 12 hours in all. That will give you a lot of practical information about labor organizing. But yeah, it takes practice, and even I think to grasp some of what's said in the organizing manuals, you do need some experience. So it's definitely a practice and theory intertwined thing. But I highly encourage people to do that, because we need to rebuild the labor union. See if it's for you. There are a lot of skills involved. Some people are more leaders and some people are more supporters. But we need people who know what they're doing. So do check it out. On Midwit Marx, here at the Institute, giving off some serious cult vibes. Yeah, I don't know. I don't watch them, so I don't know. I just see the bad takes as they used to show up on Twitter. I completely understand. I joined the IWW. It's really helped me to build a radical solidarity unionism. Yeah, the IWW is a radical anti-capitalist labor union. They have a very fascinating history. I think they're one of the best things, if not the best thing, in the U.S. left in all of history. They had extensive reach. They were co-founded by Eugene Debs. I mean, there's like major powerhouses involved in that union. Unfortunately split, were raided by the government, still exist today, I think are crippled by anarchist ideology today. But they are interested in rebuilding the labor movement and on training people in DIY tactics about how to do that. So yeah, iww.org is their website if you want to check it out. From learning more on organizing, I should have waited on the internal union criticism before I had built up others who are on my side. At first, I was willing to use the IWW because of the mass campaign. I talked to my small organization committee, because the IWW, this is the person who was organizing at Starbucks. There was a mass campaign going on through the IWW at Starbucks. I talked to my small organizing committee. We agreed to go with their union, the IWW, because we didn't want our shop to be easily singled out. I grew impatient because others in the committee had quit because of frustration, which then drove me to impatience. Yeah. It does take a long time to build relationships and build solidarity. Take your time, do it slowly and secretly, absolutely. That is covered in the organizing manuals, like building a social map of the workplace, who's friends with who rides to work with who, who's the boss's nephew, who's friends with that person, etc., etc. But yeah, sometimes tensions mount. People who are sympathetic to the union quit. You're left with one or two people. Sometimes people just feel that it's, better for them to just move on rather than sticking it out. It depends. It was thanks to S4A that I first heard about the IWW, so thank you very much, because it's my passion and something I work towards every day and keep moving forward. Well, you're welcome, and I'm glad you got that out of it. I do think that getting involved in union movements, people often ask, what can we do? What party should I join? This and that. Like I've said, I think we need to rebuild the labor movement before the parallel political struggle is really going to take on significant dimensions. And a lot of the parties are really small and they're not going to do anything anyway. So, you can join one if you want. I probably am most impressed with Politsturm right now, which is a pre-party formation. We read their About Us statement a while back, and I agreed with it. They're also international, and I just find the work that they're doing impressive over there. They're anti-revisionist Marxist-Leninists, and they think that we don't really have the party right now, but they're forming Marxist study groups and, like I said, sort of a pre-party formation. Otherwise, trying to rebuild the labor movement is something that can only help. And the IWW is a very sort of hands-on DIY way to do it without relying on union bureaucrats and lawyers and all that kind of stuff. And you really don't need those things, because it is about building worker power on the shop floor more than anything else. So I'm glad that was useful for you. And I think it's something, if people are really looking for immediate actions, they're raring to go, they care, they want to start just getting involved in something now, that's a good thing you can get really hands-on with in a tangible way immediately. So yeah. But yeah, like you said, the organizing effort takes time. Patience is key, because, Rome wasn't built overnight in a month. It's something that can take a long time to develop and grow. Union campaigns can take a year, before you're ready to go public, with just all the behind-the-scenes secretive work that you have to do in finding sympathetic people, like starting to have meetings. There's a whole art to it. And yeah, it can take like months and months, sometimes years, for that to be in a position where you're ready to go public at all, make any demands. So it's not immediate in that sense, but it is immediate that you can start that work that takes patience now. And I recommend it, because even the experience of being in a situation of, meeting with people and stuff like that, even that is more sort of democracy and planning to have a say in your day-to-day life than most people in capitalism have ever experienced. So that in itself can just be really positive, and yeah, I encourage it. Yellow union, meaning non-militant or cowardly. Yeah, a company union in this case. So a red union is a militant revolutionary union. Yellow union, yellow is more the color of capitalism in this context. So yeah, that was an audiobook from Doug Jaffray, a Politsturm member, by the way, who had done union organizing within. There already was a union in the shop, but it was completely non-militant and sold out to the company. So he started up a militant campaign within the Yellow Union. In the IWW, this is, if you're in the IWW and another union, they call it dual carding. And this is kind of a common thing, is for the sellout business union to, not be militant in any way, and then to get an organizing committee within the union going to turn the union back into a fighting union that maybe it was decades ago, I took the organizer training class with the IWW, and it really helped me. Yeah, we have the organizing manual on the channel. Doing the actual class, you'll do like other stuff. It's not just reading. So it's like, there's you have to be comfortable with talking to people, and you have to be sly enough to be able to do it without the managers noticing, and like if you do get noticed, how to play it off that like it's not threatening to the company or whatever. So yeah, there's a lot of skills you can improve, through actually practice and role playing and stuff like that. At one point in the Starbucks union, I helped to orchestrate a threat of a walkout because they refused to close when there were cockroaches. Wow. Yeah, so like there's multiple things you can do at that point. Walking out because of that is definitely one thing that's very like worker centered. There's also like obviously anonymous tips can be put into the regulatory authorities, although that's less oriented around worker power. But yeah. I've been studying the IWW history in the book Under the Iron Heel by Ahmed White, which I highly recommend. Okay. So yeah, the person who joined the IWW said, an organizer reached out, we met through Zoom every week. That's cool. So you had like a mentorship going. We forced the bosses to close the store, the cockroach thing, by that threat. After that, I seriously worked on how to organize, and I'm still learning and sharing with others who are ready for action. I believe, like many here, that we should be building unions, and that now is a major focus. Okay. So the other person is saying, they know that I'm trying to organize at my work, and I'm still pushing. They're trying to stop me, but I will never quit, and I will make sacrifices and do whatever I have to do. It really is like once you have engaged in a union campaign, it's hard to go back to like ever just being an employee. Like after I first sort of had success, I had varying degrees of success, but like after I had kind of like what I would consider like the most success, it was very hard to not go into a workplace and not immediately just start, mapping it out and sizing it up and trying to make those connections of like, all right, here's a person that seems actually comfortable with like, they don't get uncomfortable if I complain about work or, the conditions or whatever. But you have to really like, it has to be kind of tentative. You have to be very careful. So yeah. We have truth on our side. We are the truth. The company is a lie and exploitative and will expose itself every day. Never talk at work. It depends on conditions, but be careful because they use a lot of technology surveillance to monitor employees at work. There are some lower tech, smaller businesses that don't really, use cameras or anything. It depends. You can it just depends. I've been in workplaces that have cameras and ones that don't, and it depends. How have I been? I've been pretty good. Actually. I don't know what else to say. I've been pretty good. Thank you for asking. So at this workplace, they use webcams and microphones to tap and listen to workers. They also monitor our phones through apps and Wi-Fi. I will never quit this fight for solidarity of labor. I started out reckless, but I learned that this was not the way. Yeah, people go in really gung-ho at first, and then you realize that it's like, oh, I have to be more, more James Bond than like Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's like tactical, strategic. You wanna just go in and be like, let's do this, and you're talking to people who have no idea what you're talking about. So it takes a long time to build it up. And yeah, highly recommend people check out the organizing manuals and that playlist that I mentioned. Going back into the comments that I pulled off of YouTube, let's do some of these. What do you mean when you say economism? Okay, good question. Economism in a Marxist context doesn't mean being economical. Economism was a trend in the Russian Marxist movement circa 1900. Also, I think to some extent in the German Marxist movement at that time, sort of reform or revolution, also Lenin's What is to be Done. The economists were pseudo-Marxist revisionists who believed that the most that workers, or like the working masses, could do was achieve trade union consciousness. That is, that they could become aware, or that we could become aware, that organizing on the shop floor could result in better conditions, better pay, some more control on the shop floor. But that revolutionary political consciousness needed to be left to the liberal intelligentsia, and that basically the proletarian movement shouldn't attempt to form a vanguard or start, doing political theorizing, which of course Lenin was correctly interpreting out of Marx and Engels' writings, that we should do that. But they were like, no, just let the masses go and be spontaneous, and we should just sort of document the masses' spontaneous activity, but leave the theorizing of revolution to the liberal intelligentsia. And also, if the masses do enough spontaneous activity, they can sort of maybe figure out socialist ideology on their own from that. But again, no vanguard, and we shouldn't try to spread political theory among the masses. So that was the economists, people who thought that the masses should just basically focus on trade union consciousness and not revolutionary consciousness. That's what that means. Pops up from time to time. And it's one strain of revisionism. It's funny, reading Luxemburg's Reform or Revolution. Bernstein really covered so many different kinds of revisionism. It was like a catalog, an encyclopedia of revisionism. So another question, I actually don't, but I'll put this out there for the chat. Does anyone have good book suggestions pertaining to Allende? I do not, but I don't know if anybody has a book they want to recommend on democratic socialism and Allende in Chile. Another comment, question, any tips on how to fix a right-to-work state? Well, so the best fix would be repealing Taft-Hartley, all right? Because that's really where a lot of this comes from. But I did a little searching on this, and so Michigan, earlier this year, actually became the first state in decades to repeal the right-to-work law. So here's an article, March 24th, I missed this at the time, out of Lansing, Michigan. Michigan, long known as a mainstay of organized labor, on Friday became the first state in decades to repeal a union-restricting law known as right to work that was passed over a decade ago by a Republican-controlled legislature. The state's right-to-work law had allowed those in unionized workplaces to opt out of paying union dues and fees. Its repeal is seen as a major victory for organized labor, with union membership reaching an all-time low last year. Today, we are coming together to restore workers' rights, protect Michiganders on the job, and grow Michigan's middle-class, Democratic governor, Gretchen Whitmer, said in a statement Friday after signing the legislation. Now, the article goes on. Obviously, though, as communists, we do not support this nonsense about the purpose of unions is to build a middle class. It's a bunch of horse shit. The purpose of unions is to struggle for better conditions in the here and now, and to build class consciousness on the road to seeing the necessity of revolution, because you're just not going to really be able to get that much out of capitalism. You should get everything you can, but you will get so much more when you're ready to do that revolution and actually break down the wall between capitalism and socialism with the hammer blow, as Luxemburg puts it, of social revolution. So, I mean, some of this legislation can be repealed. Taft-Hartley is kind of the main thing. Bernie Sanders was talking about repealing parts of the Taft-Hartley anti-union legislation, which was passed in, I want to say, 1948, in the wake of World War II and McCarthyism, Second Red Scare. That legislation decimated, just gutted the labor movement. We saw the labor movement peak and then decline. Shortly after that, it's been decline ever since. But anyway, it can be done. I don't know all of the details of this particular struggle, but there is something for you. What else? While we're on the subject of unions, here is somebody's story about the Teamsters and the Vote No campaign. Okay, thanks for bringing up the Vote No campaign. I canvassed for Sean O'Brien's Teamsters United slate during the last IBT, it would be the Teamsters election. I drove with a few people to a different UPS warehouse about an hour away to hand out flyers. Sean O'Brien painted himself as a militant leader of the Teamsters that was going to, quote, take on UPS. After Sean O'Brien won the election, it started to become clear to me that he wasn't who he said he was, even before negotiations started. Problems within our local continued, such as extremely low member education and bad faith representation. The business agent of our local 79, Thor Johnson, was one of 6 people on O'Brien's slate, and he was made the president of the southern region. Thor Johnson completely disregarded members who were protesting for PPE in 2020. Instead, he paraded himself through the warehouse with no mask and told them he, quote, didn't see an issue. Later, I found out from a coworker who's related to the preload steward that the preload steward was regularly playing golf with the preload manager. This is like such a cliche of the sellout union leadership. Such a cliche. Anyway, this information infuriated me, and I shared it with as many coworkers in the building as I could. That's when I was called into the office for a meeting with the preload steward and manager, best golf buddies, where I was told by the steward something like, Thor Johnson said it's okay if we spend time with management. How like, if that was a genuine, but he said it was okay, what level of lack of independent thinking capability would you need for that not to raise red flags with you? Like, when he told you it was okay, you should have started a campaign against him, not like said, oh, okay. And the preload manager said verbatim, we don't play golf together, and even if we did, it wouldn't be a conflict of interest. Yeah, of course. Months later, Thor Johnson shows up to our building asking workers to donate to the political lobbying fund while wearing a thin blue line face mask, if that tells you anything. Additionally, the personal harassment I faced from management was unbelievable and only got worse and worse over time because the local union was working with them to delay harassment grievance hearings for months until UPS had some BS discipline against me to hold over my head. Eventually, I saw no hope for anything changing and couldn't take it anymore, so I quit and started doing landscaping. So there you go. A lot of people were touting this Teamsters thing, which seemed good at first. As we covered, yeah, it did seem good at first. Then it seems like actually the contract wasn't worth shit, and they just sort of did the bad contract to avoid a strike. So you had all the people geared up for a strike, and instead of actually doing the strike, they were like, no, here's a contract, don't strike. So people were like, okay, we won't strike. Then it turns out the contract was like empty, so the workers got nothing, but the company got them not to strike. So, yeah, anyway. All right, what else? Oh yeah, there was somebody commenting on a video that I did about CPUSA supporting the Democratic Party, and specifically the hashtag Vote Against Fascism campaign. That's not how it works, guys. But anyway, the comment was, I've known some members of the party, CPUSA, that were mostly good people that fell for the Vote Against Fascism campaign. Their reasoning was, I'd rather have neoliberalism than fascism. And my response was, neoliberalism is what allows fascism to flourish. They really didn't have a response for that and just still voted for Biden anyway. And again, what individual people do with their vote really less the issue here than the Communist Party of the United States supporting such an opportunist line and, inculcating that idea, that opportunism, that theory into people that the Democratic Party is really a significant difference. You can vote against fascism. None of that is how this works. The Democrats and Republicans, the Democratic Party has been around since 1828. That's when they first took the White House. It's been almost 200 years. And this system belongs to them as much as it belongs to anyone. They are the problem. I mean, they're half of it. but they work hand in glove with the Republican Party to maintain this system against us. They're not part of the solution and never will be. And the sort of Democrats' standard neoliberal imperialism versus the Republicans' yes, more outwardly reactionary, more in-your-face, more crude forms of right-wing appeals. Yeah, it's good cop, bad cop. But they're both cops. They're both here to bust you. They're both here for the same ultimate purpose. And having the Communist Party putting out this ridiculous, we're going to do some kind of people's front against fascism with, including the Democratic Party, which is a fascist collaborating party. They're not an anti-fascist. The Democratic Party, let's say it again, is not an anti-fascist party. You can't make an anti-fascist coalition with a fascist collaborating party. If the Democrats were serious in any way about stopping fascism or the Republican Party, they would ally with the left, enact broad popular reforms, Medicare for all, you name it, housing reform, student debt, college education reform, refund the public K through 12s, on and on and on. They would do all of that, and they would ally with the left and whoever to get it done. And in so doing, they would shatter the Republican Party into many small pieces, reducing it in power from a federal national party to a party with some regional influence only, and we would move on. Why don't they do this? Well, the reason is the people who fund the Democratic Party are mostly also the same people who fund the Republican Party. And they represent the same basic class interests, the 1%. There are some slight differences, like you get teachers' unions, public employee unions, and a couple of other differences funding the Democrats, and then you get more of the building trades and a couple of other things funding the Republicans. We went through this in a live stream somewhere in live stream number like 70s or 80s somewhere, going through opensecrets.org, which tracks political donations, to the top 10 Democrats and the top 10 Republicans. What we found was the top 30 industries were virtually identical, and the top 10, again, were like virtually identical. It's like banking, the medical industry, like these parties are owned by the same people. They're not ever going to substantially have different positions. So what would it mean if the Democrats allied with the left to crush the Republican Party? Well, then it means that this puppet show of good cop, bad cop is over. If you actually destroyed the Republicans and took them out at least of national politics, then the Democrats would actually have to face off against the left, who currently are suppressed, but in that scenario would be an actual contender for some kind of power. That is the last thing that the people who fund both parties want. So CPUSA putting that line out there, it's just a bunch of fucking bullshit. And there's no support for it whatsoever. I mean, this is like Fascism. All right. I think we're caught up there. Oh, I did want to share this also. So from Comrade Itagen, I mentioned this before, Italian fascist government raids students offering free housing in Florence. Let's look this up. I got a couple of screenshots here. Itagen posted this. All right, Italian fascist government raids students offering free housing in Florence. The Italian police are currently, quote, liberating the Self-Managed Student House PDM27, a political project that for 8 years has given a home to hundreds of students and has always mobilized to support students' rights. They used a helicopter and heat vision to, quote, liberate the building. But what happened exactly? Today at 6 a.m., the police, after being called from the Anti-Mafia Commission, for some reason they did not have anything to do with the mafia, and the word mafia is absent from the reports, raided the building from the roof and front door. They sent 15 people on the streets, most of them students who could not afford to pay the ever more increasing rents of Florence. By the way, people don't know, homeless students is a thing in the United States, apparently also in Italy too, but people who are full-time students and living in a tent, that is definitely a thing. I went to the scene and interviewed 5 people of the almost 30 who gathered in solidarity. They're all devastated because they lost their home in this show of force. Rents go from 600 to 800 euros per month in Florence. This also coincided with increased prices at university canteens in Florence and all of Tuscany. The police described the occupants as antagonists, even though they just wanted a place to live in. There's an obvious display of force from the government, who even called the journalists in advance to inform them of this operation. Solidarity with the students, down with the fascist state, viva il comunismo. So, yeah, if you're not aware, Italy now has a neo-fascist prime minister who has been a member of fascist political parties her entire adult life, since age 15. She was a member of the, talking about Meloni, of course, she was a member of the successor to Mussolini's party, and that's been her entire, for the last 30 years, she's like 45, 46, that's been her entire adult political history, you know, going back to 15. So that's what you got there, and then there's some pictures. There you go, from the raids. So thanks to Itagen for sending that in. What else do we have here? Got the Death with Dignity is the only other thing left. Definitely am doing a long stream today, but let's get back into the chat for a minute. So I was meaning tenant unions and workplace ones along with organizing the homeless. I believe that's the stage that we're at. Yeah, so thank you. That inspires me that much more to continue on the Homeless Industrial Complex playlist. I'll definitely be doing that. And yeah, talking about the United States specifically. Homelessness is a serious process. Trade unions are more like the trader unions, yeah. The Vanguard Party, which is not completely formed, or do we know the form it will take? We'll have to adjust to material conditions that will come from the masses begging to organize, and it will have to be able to adapt. Yeah, we're just not at that point where people are really like clamoring for, we need a Vanguard Party. There's a little of it, but we're talking about hundreds, maybe a few thousand people at this point. It's still very scattered. Yeah, we will get there. As, you know, struggle intensifies, it will generate a vanguard of highly class-conscious people. The demand for a party will increase, and we will get that party as we go. I already think that process is underway, but it is still, I think, in the early stages. On a state level, on a state legislative level, there's some good shit happening in Michigan and Illinois. The GOP governor here in Pennsylvania tried to pass right to work since 2014. We have not had a GOP governor, and no right to work passed here. Every other state, take note. The only way we'll get Taft-Hartley completely repealed is as a compromise from the ruling class by mass action. That movement will have to be built, not spontaneous. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that's when we were talking in the beginning about that quote from Lenin about class struggle necessarily, well, and going back to the Communist Manifesto, that real class struggle on that energized, consolidated, coherent level across the whole movement necessarily also becomes a political struggle. That's the kind of thing we're talking about, yeah. On the positive side, it seems like the rank and file of the Teamsters is becoming more class conscious. Struggle will do that. That's why I think, you know, I've been advocating for people to engage in whatever next steps they're ready to do. And, you know, I've said to people, it's like if the only thing going on is DSA or the Greens, that's the only thing on your horizon, do that. Meet the people you can. Engage in the struggle you can. You will undoubtedly have criticisms. You will undoubtedly see things that do not work and that you would not want to repeat. But until people keep taking steps along this way, you know, if you just freeze up, don't get involved in anything, you don't meet anybody, you don't learn about other stuff you would have learned about had you been out there involved in talking to people that currently are strangers to you, but that you would get to know through the struggle. That's how we move this thing along. We got to keep taking steps. Whatever seems like a next step to you, take it. Don't, you know, hold back. I mean, be careful, obviously, but like, if something seems like a reasonable next step to you after evaluating it carefully, then take it. And, you know, it's going to be imperfect. We're not at a stage where we have a great, super well-developed, theoretically advanced and experienced vanguard. We're not there. There's going to be mistakes, but you know, only they who never attempt anything never make any mistakes. You got to make mistakes. You just try to keep them to a minimum, obviously, and learn from other mistakes and the mistakes of history rather than just, your own and repeating them wherever possible. Learn the easy way, not the hard way, where you can. But you got to get out there. You got to do this stuff. And that is how we will generate a vanguard. That combined with the book study, combined with seeing our efforts in the context of the overall 175 years of scientific socialism, that's where this takes on those dimensions of being a class struggle and launching that parallel political struggle for the conquest of power by the proletariat. So yeah, it's bound to happen with more strikes where you see the leadership sell you out, and then people have a meeting and they're like, how do we avoid this in the future? How do we go around them? Do we form a wildcat? Do we find an independent organizing committee and do wildcat strikes? Like, what needs to happen? But as people get serious about it and experienced enough to know what works and what doesn't work and what's likely to work and, etc., that will come about more and more. But a lot of it's gonna come through experience. No one should be allowed to play golf. End golf. Yeah, absolutely. Not to mention golf courses are environmentally destructive and, should be used. They could be used for all kinds of other purposes, public housing, whatever. There's anytime there's a golf course, there's a better use for that land, for sure. Golf should result in immediate deportation to the ocean floor. Yeah, you do not want your union leaders wearing a thin blue line mask. That's an easy way to tell this person needs to go. That is the definition of a class traitor. Yeah. CPUSA, vote for a more well-behaved fascist state. Woo. Yeah. The Democrats don't actually fight the Republicans. I mean, like, at the top levels in particular, Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi have both made comments like, we need a strong Republican Party. Yeah, because they want to keep the system around forever, and they know that's the only way to do it. Is this, again, just, eternal good cop, bad cop, dog and pony show. It's the facade of democracy with actual, no change possible in the content. CPUSA are privileged revisionists. They don't care because their struggle isn't strong, or they're just completely incompetent. Well, again, I think as the movement gets stronger and more class conscious, let me put it this way. I've been running this channel for 3 years. I've talked to a lot of people interested in communism in this time. I have not really met any outspoken advocates of this position of CPUSA's. I encountered 2 or 3 people on Twitter who, in I thought, very cult-like fashion, not supported by evidence, but just sort of repeating the party line, couldn't back it up, couldn't reason it through very well. Aside from that, very sort of cult-like defenses of the Vote Against Fascism campaign. Also very disingenuous stuff where they're like, well, we didn't say to vote for Biden. Okay, who are you saying? Like, unless you're saying to vote green or something, then you're definitely saying to vote Biden, right? So, can we just dispense with this? Anyway, that has predominated in CPUSA for decades now. It's not going to hold up, and expect to see a fight within CPUSA as the overall struggle heats up and class consciousness increases, because aside from those 2 or 3 very disingenuous people that I interacted with on Twitter or something, I have yet to encounter anyone who seriously defends that. And I've talked to hundreds of people in the comments, and no one defends it. So that will change at some point. I don't know exactly how or when, but it will. At best, the CPUSA model can work to kill a socialist movement in a country where they strip away their own power until the left is lost for a generation or so. Yeah, that's exactly what happened here. I'm worried that the USA is going to become Nazi Germany 2.0, or even worse than that. I mean, it's definitely going in that direction. Comment, I will stand my ground and do everything possible to stop it. Yeah, Jimmy Dore stumping for Georgia Meloni. Um, that guy is just so far off the deep end at this point. We need you out here educating us for many more years. Oh yeah, no, don't worry about it. Want to hear a joke? Jimmy Dore. Fucked it up. You've been learning from the Jimmy Dore School of Comedy. Jimmy Dore is a joke, but he is not funny. He is a joke, not a comedian. One of my friends in the shelter and I have been openly talking about the Black Panthers, and I see some in the shelter open to socialism, so not all is lost where I am. Good. Any thoughts on Kshama Sawant? I mean, she's a Trotskyist. That's never really to be commended. Um, Beyond that, I don't know. I know there's been kind of a socialist alternative effort to enter into DSA, enter in the entryism sense. At this point, there's no Comintern anymore. Just Trotskyists form your own fucking parties. It is obnoxious. I've seen efforts at socialists, or Trotskyists specifically, entryism into other parties. It's obnoxious. Everyone hates it. It's a great way to make everyone hate you, which Trotskyists are really good at, honestly. Really, really good at. But, yeah, I mean, I think DSA has a rule, actually, that people who are members of organizations, other organizations that practice democratic centralism, are technically not allowed to join DSA. Now, I don't think that really would preclude, lone members who are in other organizations from joining. But DSA has already made moves, I think, through things like that in particular, to try to prevent Trotskyist entryism. And so I don't know. I don't know how closely she's tied in with that. Beside that, I haven't really seen her in the news that much. It's usually in connection with DSA because there is a lot of activity going on in DSA, and that is, sort of unfortunately at this point, that is still where a lot of the U.S. left is at in terms of their class consciousness and everything like that. So, you go to where the people are, in other words, and I think there's a lot of advanced masses in DSA. DSA may split at some point where the left, even if the left of DSA split off, it would still by itself constitute the largest socialist organization in this country. So, I mean, even that would be a good outcome. For now, DSA hasn't split yet. So anyway, that's what came up when I started thinking about Kshama Sawant. I haven't really seen her do anything else recently, so I don't know. I met the PSL at a rally. I didn't try to join because of the reputation. I didn't really reach out. I rather build up the IWW instead of the PSL. Yeah, I mean, I hear good things, and, there's also some sort of obvious, not as great things. I think there's a lot of people who are massively annoying on China, for example. I don't know. I think all of this will get worked out in time. We're not there yet. Speaking of wildcat strikes, Midwestern Marx was talking about organizing the working class and didn't know what a wildcat strike was. Awesome. And again, if you're a learning communist, there's things you can do, but maybe being real outspoken on a major YouTube channel is not one of it. CPUSA shills make me sick. Yeah, I find a lot more reluctant CPUSA members than enthusiastic. They'll be like, oh, I love the people in my local. We're doing local meetings. It's great. No one in my local agrees with the national leadership. That is in sum, the most common sentiment that I hear out of CPUSA members. They're like, I'm glad I joined. I met a lot of great comrades in my local. No one here supports the national party's positions on anything. Okay. Why are you, why is it still then CPUSA, or what's going on with your leadership that they're completely out of step with the entire rest of the party? So, yeah. Well, and again, so mentioning that with PSL individual branches can be great. It's the National, which tends to be more riddled with revisionism. It depends. I mean, I think I've seen more people in PSL like going out there like pretty heavy on China stuff, for example. You'll find that among CPUSA people as well. Also, I think both parties have similar problems in that department. PSL, I think, tends to be more confident in going out there and running with that, although they don't. I mean, well, CPUSA is a party too. Anyway, being the kind of party that they are, which actually runs in elections, PSL is, you're less likely to hear that sort of vote Democrat against fascism kind of thing. That's why I was telling people, I'd almost recommend the Green Party over CPUSA, because at least the Green Party doesn't pretend to be fucking Marxist. You know what I mean? If you're going to get more liberal stuff, I'd rather you get it from people who aren't also going to tell you that what they're doing is Marxist. Though that said, there are Marxists within the Green Party as well. So, it depends. I have to say, I was starting to comment on this in the articles on Robochia Gazeta comments, and then I wound up just kind of passing on it. Figured it would come up sooner or later, and here it is the next day. People were giving me so much shit for even mentioning the Green Party. And there's all these like super haughty online communists of like, what, the Green Party isn't Marxist, how could you even mention it? Blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, look, I just want to see people do whatever they're ready to do that's actually in their area, because usually people do one of two things. One, they try to go reform and work within the Democratic Party, and then when they see that doesn't work, two, they drop out and do absolutely fucking nothing. All right? So that's usually what happens. And then most people in the broader left are just never going to be ready to join a Marxist thing. That's just not usually how it works. Maybe after a successful revolution, but certainly not before, okay? That's just not how it works. The Communist Party is not, it's a vanguard party, and it's not necessarily like a mass party in that sense. Green Party, I mean, Howie Hawkins was talking about Green Party as a mass party and trying to sort of change the membership model. So, I mean, there are efforts to make it sort of more like the old Socialist Party or something like that. But I just find it funny. I get so much shit for even mentioning, like, hey, I'd like to see people just not standing around and doing nothing for the time being. And now, Cornel West is running, and it's like, so based or whatever. And it's just like, honestly, I'll just say to anybody else thinking about doing a channel or just even being prominent on social media, go with what you know is right and you can actually support, because there's just going to be no shortage of clowns, really an endless supply of clowns trying to heckle you and tell you what to do with your messaging and whatever. And sometimes, people can give you some actually evidence-based advice or, clue you into something you didn't know about. But there's plenty of people who just blow at the winds of whatever their favorite streamer told them, whether it's based in any kind of history or material situation or whatever. And just, there's absolutely no shortage of people like that. That's why you have to do the reading, get informed, try to follow current events, and do what you think is correct. And, if you end up being wrong, you're probably not even going to end up being that wrong. You probably won't even be that far off. And it's just going to be better for everyone in the end. I think Midwit Marx is a member of CPUSA. Yeah, I think you're correct about that. CPUSA needs a kick in the ass, and maybe the capitalists will give it to him. We'll see. I've been hearing a ton about Bordiga a lot lately. Good heavens, why? Like, what circles are you hanging out in that you're hearing Bordiga chat? DSA is comfort food for SoCal. I'm not sure what that socially conscious liberals. I mean, yes and no. There's also actual Marxists in there as well. So it's a big tent. It's a big organization with a big membership count. So, I mean, there's tens of thousands of people in there. Some are liberals. I mean, this is just like, go back to the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party or the German Social Democratic Labor Party that we were just talking about, in the circa 1900 stuff. This is what happens when you have a big tent socialist party, is you get some communists and you get some Bernsteins, and you gotta fight them. And this is just the way it is, It's ideological struggle within proletarian organizations. That's what you need. I did see the DSA sticking up for the no vote for the Teamsters and the rank and file workers. That's what I'm saying. It's like you will see some actually good stuff in there. I do think it's worth at this point continuing ideological fights within DSA. Now, somebody did send an article recently, let me pull this up, that DSA on the national level is still dominated by people who were able to get a majority, let me pull it up, on the way that they put it was that they are, where the hell did I put this? I opened a new tab recently and I sort of like, it broke the flow. Alright, I'm not going to find it now, but somebody sent me an article that said DSA basically just voted to continue to be a caucus of the Democratic Party. So the struggle goes on, in other words.